All right, we're going to go through all of this very, very slowly, very precisely. There's a lot of ground to cover in the last 2 minutes, even breaking news I'll get to in a second. So tomorrow morning, we will finally get a chance to witness one of the most important hearings in the history of Supreme Court nominations. As I have said many, many times, the 36-year-old allegation made by Professor Christine Ford against Judge Kavanaugh, I've said from the beginning it should be taken seriously. And it has been, by Republicans, by the president. And at 10 a.m., in an open hearing, they will lay it all on the table, and the U.S. Senate, they will make an informed decision about Judge Kavanaugh. Remember, their constitutional role is advice and consent. And of course, context is very, very important. 40 years of one's life is very important. Judge Kavanaugh has been in the public spotlight for all these decades, and because of his work, he has literally he has passed 6 deep background FBI checks. Those that know Kavanaugh the best, high school friends, college friends, those that went to law school, girlfriends, colleagues, fellow judges, clerks, those people that have all worked with him, parents of the girls he coached in basketball and other sports. Democrats, Republicans have all praised Kavanaugh for his character, his judgment, his friendship, who he is. Throughout his entire life, he never, until, 12 days ago, faced any allegation of any sexual misconduct ever. And Judge Kavanaugh has one of the most extensive track records of any federal judge. He worked in one of the most highest-profile federal courts. He's been there for years. And we also know that Professor Ford and her groping allegations against him have a lot of issues. We're going to go step by step through every allegation tonight. These charges were made to congressional Democrats, just a few weeks ago, not an independent law enforcement agency. And by the way, the claim dates back when Ford and Kavanaugh were in high school 36 years ago. And Ford cannot remember a date, a location of the alleged incident. She can't remember what happened before or after the incident. The 4 witnesses that Ford listed to corroborate her claims, all of them deny what she is alleging. And Professor Ford is represented by an attorney who we pointed out on this show is a left-wing activist who once vowed to resist Donald Trump at every level and who's inconsistent on important issues involving sexual harassment in the workplace. She didn't believe Paula Jones, obviously. She defended Al Franken. Now, despite all of these warning signs, it is so important that Professor Ford and Judge Kavanaugh speak under oath. It's important to take it seriously. Now, Republicans and the president, they have made every accommodation possible. And tonight, Democrats are doing the exact opposite. They have already convicted Judge Kavanaugh before even hearing from him or Professor Ford. The left, so many of them, rushing to judgment on 2 other uncorroborated claims against Kavanaugh. Allegations that are so salacious, they will literally tonight make your head spin. Now, the second claim that came out in the New Yorker magazine was so outrageous, so unsubstantiated, that even the Trump-hating New York Times refused to officially report on it. In this case, a woman named Deborah Ramirez. She alleged that in the 1980s, Kavanaugh might have exposed himself to her at a drunken college party. Ramirez herself, she wasn't totally sure if it was Kavanaugh, if he was the perpetrator. According to her own words, her own account, she became, quote, quickly inebriated at the party. She was, quote, her own words, foggy and slurring her words. And Ramirez even acknowledged that she had significant memory gaps from that evening. Now, those Ramirez listed as witnesses in her case to the incident, they've all flatly denied her charge, including her own best friend. Not a single person corroborating her story, not one. And tonight, just moments ago, we learned there's another accuser now making an anonymous hearsay claim about an incident that took place between Kavanaugh and a woman in 1998. And this anonymous NBC News report is obviously a report that I doubt NBC News would ever make about Tom Brokaw or Matt Lauer or Andy Lack. They wouldn't do it about people that they work with or have worked with over the years. So the question is, how is Judge Kavanaugh now supposed to defend himself from now an anonymous accuser at the 11th hour? Which now brings us to the single most sickening allegation that the left wants you to believe as absolute fact. It was brought into the public domain by, you know him, He's on, what, fake news CNN every hour on the hour. And if he's not there, he's over at Conspiracy TV, MSNBC. Michael Avenatti, the bombastic, untrustworthy, fame-seeking attorney who made it his life's mission to resist and hate Donald Trump, which is fine. Avenatti's client in this case is a woman named Julie Swetnick. And at this late hour, she is alleging that between 1981 and 1983, that she attended at least 10 parties where she claims that Judge Kavanaugh and his friend Mark Judge routinely drugged female partygoers, that this happened regularly, almost on a weekend basis, and even in the summer, in an organized scheme to either give them grain alcohol or give them drugs, to gang rape, train rape these women. She claims to have witnessed this on many occasions, and also claims to have been the victim of a gang rape where Kavanaugh was present, although she did stop short of naming Kavanaugh as one of the alleged rapists. So she's saying that there were 10 parties. This was supposed to be a regular, almost weekly practice where gang rape took place and girls, young girls, were drugged and raped. And she said nothing in 36 years, nor did anybody else who ever went to any of these parties, not a single person. No specific locations, no specific dates were given, no names were given other than Mark Judge and Judge Kavanaugh. No other witnesses listed. No one has corroborated these claims. And during the alleged time period, Swetnick would have been enrolled in college, while Kavanaugh would have been a 15 or 16-year-old high school student. She described boys waiting in line to rape drugged women. And she says she went to at least 10 of these parties, and many more happened. And nobody ever told a teacher, a law enforcement representative, a parent, anybody. Everybody that was a part of this all kept it secret. In a statement, Kavanaugh reacted to this. This is what he said. This is ridiculous and from the Twilight Zone. I don't know who this is, and this never happened. And today, just hours after these allegations became public, 64 high school acquaintances and friends of Judge Kavanaugh, they rushed to his defense in a statement, calling these claims, quote, nonsense. We never witnessed any behavior that even approaches what is described in this allegation. It is reprehensible in the extensive amount of time we collectively have spent with Brett Kavanaugh. We do not recall having ever met someone named Julie Swetnick, nor did we ever observe Brett engaging in any conduct resembling that described in Ms. Swetnick's so-called declaration. Now remember, Judge Kavanaugh told our own Martha McCallum he was a virgin throughout all of high school and most of college. Can't believe we're discussing this, but we are. Here's what he said.
People generally in high school, I think all of us have probably done things we look back on in high school and regret or cringe a bit, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an allegation of sexual assault. I've never sexually assaulted anyone. I did not have sexual intercourse or anything close to sexual intercourse in high school or for many years thereafter. And the girls from the schools I went to and I were friends.
So you're saying that through all these years that are in question, you were a virgin?
That's correct.
Never had sexual intercourse with anyone in high school?
Correct.
And through what years in college, since we're probing into your personal life here?
Many years after. I'll leave it at that. Many years after.
Now, today, Senator Lindsey Graham, he tweeted out, quote, I have a difficult time believing any person could continue going to, according to the affidavit, 10 parties over a 2-year period where women were routinely gang raped and not reported. And Graham continues, quote, why would any reasonable person continue to hang around people like this? Why would any person continue to put their friends and themselves in danger? Isn't there some duty to warn others? And also breaking just moments before we came on air, new reports that a restraining order was filed against Julie Swetnick by her ex-boyfriend. That was in 2001. Her boyfriend tonight telling the Politico, quote, right after I broke up with her, she was threatening my family, threatening my wife, threatening to do harm to my baby at that time. And then she said in a telephone conversation with Politico, I know a lot about her. She's not credible at all. He said, not at all. Look at what the Wall Street Journal is reporting just literally minutes ago. Roughly a decade ago, Ms. Swetnick was involved in a dispute with a former employer, New York Life Insurance Company, over a sexual harassment complaint that she filed. According to people familiar with the matter, representing her in the complaint was the firm run by Deborah Katz, the lawyer currently representing Dr. Ford, and the company ultimately reached a financial settlement with Ms. Swetnick, according to people in the Wall Street Journal. Now, despite everything we have now showed you, you have, and this is where we're in a crisis in this country, many in the left, many in the media, the Democratic Party, they have already convicted Judge Kavanaugh of what are horrific, life-shattering claims. And we've got the evidence. Take a look.
This is a monumental, defining moment this week when you have someone like Cosby going to prison and then in the same breath having Kavanaugh possibly going to the highest court in the land.
To be honest, that is very much a white male Republican defense to say, oh, I was a virgin, I could not have possibly sexually assaulted a woman.
Part of this backlash that we're seeing right now comes from a culture of sexism and paternalism in this country, where the patriarchy in this country has controlled everything, has silenced women generation after generation.
This is the patriarchy on full display. This is the patriarchy on full display.
So Brett Kavanaugh, I never did anything wrong. I mean, that to me was you know, it was just not believable.
Do we allow the sexual predator in chief, the admitted sexual predator in chief, to place people on the Supreme Court? He's picking the type of people that are essentially like him. And this whole thing needs a whole investigation now. This should not go forward.
While the left, the media, Democrats all rush to judgment, many others rightfully are questioning why someone with serious criminal claims would utilize the services of the very political, the very anti-Trump, maybe wanting to run for president, sleazy lawyer named Michael Avenatti. Earlier today, the president had this to say about him. Take a look.
If you look at this lawyer that just came out, he's a lowlife. He represented Democrats. Nobody ever talks about that. He's a Democrat lawyer. Not a very good one, but he's a Democrat lawyer. So it's a horrible con game. I think the people are finding it out.
I want everybody to think about this because I believe Americans are fair-minded. This isn't about Republican or Democrat tonight at all. It's not about conservative or liberal even. Michael Avenatti, Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, now the new faces of the Democratic Party. We have an election in 41 days. Avenatti gearing up for a presidential run. This is now, and this is what we've got to think about. This is now a party of no due process, no rule of law, no constitution, zero presumption of innocence. Do you know it's in the last 12 days, I can't find a single Democrat that is willing to defend the principle of presumption of innocence and due process? By the way, the party of Bill Clinton and Keith Ellison. So tonight, what we are seeing from Avenatti and the people on the left in this country, sadly, I tell you this often, they use this tactic every 2 and 4 years. Character assassination is the #1 tool in the Democratic playbook, something the president called out earlier today in a powerful press conference. How often do I say every 2-4 years they're going to call Republicans racist? How horrible is that? Sexist, misogynist, xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic. Republicans want dirty air and water, and they want children to die, and they want to throw Granny over the cliff. We now have gotten used to it. But to say that about people every election season, to do this with every Supreme Court nominee, here's what the president said.
They're actually con artists because they know how quality this man is, and they've destroyed a man's reputation. And they want to destroy it even more. And I think people are going to see that in the midterms, what they've done to this family, what they've done to these children, these beautiful children of his, and what they've done to his wife. And they know it's a big, fat con job. And they go into a room, and I guarantee you, they laugh like hell at what they pulled off on you and on the public. They laugh like hell.
Now, the president, he knows the shameful tactics of the left firsthand. Remember during the presidential election? Remember when the New York Times, I think it was top fold, they falsely accused President Trump's sexual misconduct, so-called bombshell story? Well, the only problem is the sources the Times used denied that Trump ever acted inappropriately. Now, we know because we interviewed some of them, a number of them. Here's what the president had to say about that earlier today.
I was accused by, I believe it was 4 women. You can check with Sean Hannity. You can check with Fox because they covered it very strongly. Who got paid? Excuse me. I was accused by 4 or 5 women who got paid a lot of money to make up stories about me. We caught them, and the mainstream media refused to put it on television. They refused to even write about it.
We actually followed up on this program. Everyone else in the media ignoring and just going along with the New York Times put out there. Well, I actually did some reporting, had the opportunity to interview the women from the Times fake news story. Here's what they said after the Times made the accusation. Take a look.
I have never seen him be anything but a gentleman, very gracious to women, very respectful of women, and anybody that tells me that I saw that is wrong. He was not that way to me. He wasn't that way to anybody I met. I met a lot of women when I was around him. He employs a lot of women. He deals with a lot of women, and he respects them, and they respect him.
I basically, wouldn't give them a story, and now they came out with their own version of it and took, something out of my book and just totally twisted it and made it so negative. And I have nothing but positive things to say about Donald Trump.
I don't remember the retraction in the New York Times either. Now, the left's character assassination strategy didn't start with President Trump. It is a time-tested practice from the Democratic Party. Remember what they did to Reagan's nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court, Robert Bork. He was never confirmed because of the fear-mongering, slander, outright lies from, of all people, a guy that left a woman to die and told nobody after he drove his car into a river, and he walked away and went home and went to bed. Chappaquiddick Kennedy. Take a look.
Robert Bork's America is a land in which women would be forced into back alley abortions, blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters, rogue police could break down citizens' doors in midnight raids, and school children could not be taught about evolution. Writers and artists would be censured at the whim of government.
And then a few years later, of course, Democrats tried to drag Supreme Court Justice, who's become one of the finest justices in our generation, Clarence Thomas, through the mud. 1991, Senate Democrats pulled out his former colleague, Anita Hill, making sexual harassment allegations against him. Sound familiar? This character assassination was so vicious, so horrible, so nasty, Justice Thomas called it a high-tech lynching. Take a look.
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you. You will be lynched, destroyed, caricatured by a committee of the U.S. Senate rather than hung from a tree.
Well, the circus, the disgrace, is back in Washington, and these tactics don't stop at the Supreme Court nominees. Many also tried to destroy the character. I know I was in Atlanta at the time of the Olympic bombing. Richard Jewell falsely accused as being the lone bomber. He fit the profile because he lived with his mother. He was listening to my radio show at the time and said I was only one that stood up for him and at least gave him the presumption of innocence. It changed my life. They also smeared, falsely accused. Remember the Duke lacrosse team? We didn't rush to judgment on this show. And let's not forget what the left did in Ferguson. Darren Wilson was found innocent in that case. Remember Baltimore, Freddie Gray, all the people saying he'd be convicted. Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman. How many times did the president at the time, Obama, rush to judgment? The Cambridge police acted stupidly. During every big moment, so many in the left, so many in the press rushed to judgment for pure political gain. There's no presumption of innocence ever with these people when it comes to politics. Harry Reid lies about Mitt Romney in 2012, said he hadn't paid taxes in 10 years. And when asked about it later, after the election and Romney lost, he boasts about it. He's proud of his lie. This happens every election season. One of the biggest smear jobs of all comes from Christopher Steele's dirty dossier, a document bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC to lie to you, the American people, to rig an election in this country, and then to destroy a president after with absurd, untrue, salacious claims like this. Trump's, quote, perverted conduct in Moscow included hiring the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia, and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform golden showers, or urination, a show in front of him. Well, during an interrogatory in Great Britain, Christopher Steele, under the threat of perjury, he said that dossier, oh, that's just raw intelligence. There's only a 50-50 chance. Those lies were spread to you, the American people. Hillary paid for it. Russian lies, of all things. Yet the left pushed these unverified, uncorroborated claims throughout the highest levels of our government, right into the gullible media, their arm that pushes their propaganda. And as you can see, the left's attempt to destroy the lives of people with baseless claims, it is a clear, obvious, and now predictable pattern. These are real people, unfortunately. These are real lives. When you say that someone's a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a gang rapist, real families, Democrats using all of them, pawns in a political game, no due process, no presumption of innocence. How would you feel if it was you, America, tonight? Because this is the modern Democratic Party. They have now defined themselves as a party of slander, smear, character assassination, a party of besmirchment. This is clearly who they are, because I can't find a Democrat now saying they believe in the presumption of innocence. This now defines them. They only want power for themselves. Are they talking about the economy, about security for the American people? This is why every fair-minded American has a right to be skeptical tonight. What you're witnessing is one of the ugliest smear campaigns in history. If America doesn't get this right, there will be no good people in this country that ever want to serve their country for decades to come. Why would they? They're not doing it for the money. Democrats are now the party of no due process. They're the party of no presumption of innocence. They're not the party that believes in the Constitution. Has one Democrat said presumption of innocence? I haven't heard them. And you want to know why? Because they all seem to believe when politics in play, when power is in play, that's what matters. All of this, I hope you remember in 41 days.